Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. So guys, today I just want to share some messages that I've been receiving from people around the world about the ongoing deterioration of society and all things SHTF. We're going to talk about some current events. We're going to talk about the war and what we can expect in the next couple days and weeks ahead. So let's just get right to it. Now, some of you might know there is a military parade, an annual military parade planned for in Russia, in Moscow, I believe, on May 9th, which is Monday. And I'm not sure if that's going to have taken place before the markets open, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any official announcements from the Kremlin that pertain to whether or not the war is going to escalate or de-escalate, whether they're going to claim victory. Nobody really knows at this point. It's just a bunch of speculation. It could just be, a run-of-the-mill military parade to try to bolster more support, nationalist fervor, and maybe try to, just play on that historical component of this whole thing. Because the fact is, 80% of people there still are in favor of what's going on in Ukraine. So it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the markets. Now, some people claim that they're going to declare victory on that day. Others claim that this is going to be an inflection point for the war, and they're going to call out for all-out mobilization, escalation. There's been some very sketchy reports from official sources, but ones who've been wrong before, that the Russians are calling up reservists, and that they're going to expand and broaden and declare all-out war on Ukraine on May 9th. So far, I don't think the Russians have been... They don't strike me as the type of people who are going to care about the date that they do these things on. I mean, if they're going to do it, they're just going to do it. But who knows? Who really knows? U.S. intelligence hasn't commented on this particular thing. These are just, scattered reports from here, there, and everywhere. Now, what's going on in Mariupol, which is where a lot of the attention has been in the Azovstal steel plant, apparently they're like 99% finished with that place. There's... supposedly there was some soldiers who raised the white flag there today, and but apparently there's still, according to Russian officials now, so take it with a grain of salt, they claim that there are foreign officers still buried under the rubble, or whether they're alive or not, I don't know. This is their claim. Okay, they're claiming that there are either mercenaries or officers. There's been claims that there's been, Canadian generals and, French generals, UK generals, officers of various rank. There's been all sorts of wild speculations. I mean, there's no real definitive proof for any of this. But it'll be interesting to see what is discovered, right? So a lot of people think that because that has happened now 2 days prior to the V-Day, that they're going to just declare victory, and that's going to be it. For obvious reasons, that's not going to happen. They might use it as a part of the victory thing, but I can't see them, declaring an end to the military operation yet. On the contrary, I think there's more evidence to show that this thing might escalate after the 9th. For the simple reason that right now there's been a lot of rumor, and even this has been reported on mainstream news, that U.S. intelligence has been informing a lot of the maneuvers and events like the sinking of the Moskva, the Russian ship. And if that's true, then of course we're going to see an intensification, because NATO only plans to send more weapons there. Now, I received an email from somebody who knows somebody who's fighting there, and according to them, I'm not going to read the email because it's rather lengthy, but they said that the Ukrainians have had great success in predicting Russian troop movements, and this is because they are informed by, that NATO intelligence apparatus, which is very sophisticated. And it's no surprise. I mean, we've been saying this since day one, that you're using NATO weapons, NATO intelligence with some, ragtag NATO boots on the ground in the form of mercenaries or whatever. So clearly, you're not just fighting, a broken command and control Ukrainian force. You're fighting NATO essentially, because intelligence is everything, guys. I mean, if you have information, that's like 90% of the war, really. You need to know where to strike. I mean, it's one thing to have all the tools, but if you don't know where or how to use the tools, then it's all for naught. So according to him, the Russian troop movements have been rather predictable, and they surprisingly sloppy in their methods. And of course, this is, some people would say, well, that's just, pro-Western propaganda. Other people would say, no, that's just what's happening. I think there's two ways of looking at this, okay? I think on the one hand, what's happening is that the Russians they understand that we're in the information age, obviously. And you don't fight wars in the information age the way you did in World War II, because you can see everything from space. Like, everything can be seen. You pair that with human intelligence, with, thermal imaging. And I mean, it's very hard to hide your intentions nowadays, unless you're working underground. So what the Russians are doing is they're just unleashing a volley of missiles on command and control, fuels, food, supply lines, munition centers. And they, of course, their maneuvers are going to be sloppy on the front, because, in full frontal warfare, modern warfare, it's going to be messy, and it's going to be slow, and it's going to take a huge toll on your military in terms of manpower and equipment lost. It's just going to be bloody, especially when you have two really comparable forces, because you have, of course, the Ukrainians using Soviet and NATO armaments against the Russians. Both have been dug in for a long time. Both know how to fight in those combat arenas. And as such, it's going to be bloody and it's going to be slow. So the Russian strategy up until this point hasn't really been to do a whole lot of sophisticated maneuvering, with tanks and stuff like that on the front lines. It's more about taking out, the stuff that's going on in the back, disregarding the actual frontline battles, if you will, and trying to get rid of all of the stuff that the Ukrainians need in order to fight the war. This is why NATO is so adamant about resupplying Ukrainians. Now, according to him, initially the U.S. didn't think, and most people didn't think, and a lot of people who I talk to who work in intelligence didn't think that Ukrainians would have lasted this long. And when they seen that there was a chance, that's when they said, okay, we're going to start sending even more weapons, because there's a chance now that we can actually defeat the Russians. That's what they're saying. And right now, guys, you need to know that there are fires every day, mysterious fires burning across Russia. And why this is problematic is because if Russia feels as though they are going to lose in Ukraine and that they can't salvage this, especially, this is not just Russia's existential, this is Putin as well, okay? So at some point, it is going to become a matter of pride for him. If he cannot complete this, then the escalate to de-escalate nuclear tactical nuke policy will be employed. And what that is saying, look, we have the ability to wipe you off the map. We haven't done it yet, but we're going to detonate one nuke somewhere, maybe on a battlefield, maybe on a military base or outpost or whatever. And just to show you, with the hopes that will force your capitulation. And that's That's the whole theory behind escalate to de-escalate. Now, the CIA claims that they're not going to do this. I read a report today that indicated that they don't see any, they don't have any intelligence that suggests that the Russians are actually planning to do this yet. But they don't know everything, for one. And, I think we'd only really start to see that become a real risk is if the Russians were in fact losing. Right now, it doesn't look like they are, in spite of all of the attempts from NATO. Like I said, while Kiev is standing, the Russians are still comfortable in what they're doing. When Kiev starts getting bombarded relentlessly, that's when you know the Russians are getting desperate. Okay? That's going to be the canary in the coal mine there. So let's read some emails, guys. And you're going to have to forgive me, I'm still losing my voice, so I might have to, clear my throat a few times here. I am a branch manager for one of the largest private mortgage lenders in the U.S. We have over 350 locations and do billions in mortgages each year. The owner sent out an email to all managers earlier this week, and he has purchased something called geopolitical hedge. He says that he is concerned that Russia will launch a nuclear attack on or around May 9th, Victory Day, Parade Day, which, I don't know. I don't claim to have all the info or understand the entire workings of this, but from my understanding, this 30-day, $175,000 cost policy would protect our company for a rapid rise in interest rates in the case that Russia launches a nuclear attack in the next 30 days. Point being that my company and others are taking the nuclear threat serious enough to throw large amounts of money to try and mitigate the fallout that happens. No pun intended. We all need to take the threat seriously and keep on prepping. Thanks for the great content. I've been following you since well before the pandemic. Much appreciated. Okay, well, yeah. What happens next week will definitely play a huge role in the markets. And I believe that the Russians are ahead of us in time. I don't know by how much, but yeah, on Monday, we'll see what happens at the opening bell. And right now, commodities are projected to skyrocket with this oil embargo that the EU is trying to put on Russia. It's not looking good, guys. If you're in Europe, you got to be prepping right now, man. You got to be putting a garden in the ground as fast as you can, grow as much food as you can. Try to get some means of self-defense if you can. Get some training. I know that ammunition is expensive, but especially we're going to be doing a video next week on protective equipment like body armor. In the very least, you should have a way to defend yourself, especially with the increase in crime. It's some places having, not necessarily wearing a all-out, tactical vest or body armor, but just having a plate in your backpack or something that you can use to protect yourself in that way. But we'll talk about it next week. We're in the process, guys, of building a new studio and doing a lot of things, which is why I've been doing these car videos. Okay, I've been watching your reviews since February, and I really appreciate them. While your assessments are a bit over the top, especially time-wise, but it's difficult with this crazy media cycle. Thanks for the backhanded compliment. I appreciate it. The news you aggregate are very valuable. Thank you for that. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. One element from Switzerland. The last 10 years, we've been rebuilding our capacities and capabilities to mobilize troops quickly after we lost the knowledge due to many reforms since the end of the Cold War. As a citizen drafted in the military, I served a few years in a logistical battalion, which main task was to support a logistics center in order to equip mobilized combat troops. I received a test message today for mobilization. These tests are pretty standard. It was my third since 2018 when I was put in the reserve, but in the current situation, it looks very different. All of these elements, increased size and frequency of NATO exercises in Europe, recommendations to stockpile food, these kinds of tests are not indicators of conflict because they fit in many different scenarios, but we would for sure see them in a World War III scenario. Thanks again for your efforts. Stay safe. This is coming from a guy in Switzerland. Can't get more neutral than that. And they are prepping out there. So yeah, I like his even-keeled approach to this. You know, it's like saying these things are not sufficient to say that we are entering World War III, but they're all things that would be necessarily happening if we were entering World War III. So yeah, that's a very conservative way of looking at it. What else do we got here? This is another story. Maybe let's take a news break, okay? So China, as some people know, China is looking at what's happening in Russia right now, and they're saying, okay, what is the reaction of the global community in Ukraine? It's one thing with Ukraine because it's geopolitical, but with the Chinese in Taiwan, it's more than that, because the Taiwanese have something right now which is arguably worth more than oil, and that's computer chips. I believe they make something like 90% of the chips in the world, and they make the most sophisticated chips. They are decades ahead of everybody else. And as a result of that, China wants to know, okay, what's going to happen if we go in there and we try to take this over? So what they're doing right now is they are trying to figure out how they can protect their assets from U.S. sanctions, because we all seen what happened with the Russian foreign dollars that they had. Their foreign assets were seized. And something to the tune of like $300 billion, okay, have effectively been stolen. You can say it's whether you can debate whether it's been stolen or not, or whether it's just been, held temporarily. It's going to be distributed to rebuild Ukraine, whatever the case might be. The fact of the matter is those funds are frozen and they cannot access them. So China is scrambling to find ways to protect its trillions of dollars in foreign assets from U.S.-led sanctions similar to those imposed on Russia. Chinese regulators held an emergency meeting with domestic and foreign banks last month to discuss protecting trillions of dollars in overseas assets from U.S.-led sanctions. Now, this is important because just a couple days ago, I believe the second largest incursion of China into Taiwanese airspace was conducted, and the rhetoric is becoming much more bellicose towards the United States. It's becoming much more aggressive from the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they're starting to really posture towards the U.S. You'll never see Xi Jinping do this, but they get their foreign ministry to do it. And usually in these press conferences, they're pretty serious. So, and as I talked about in a recent video about how they are suspecting that, or they're trying to say that the U.S. are trying to incite an uprising in Shanghai over the lockdowns, that they're trying to create civil unrest. And so permeating that whole CCP is this idea that there's a coming war with the United States. And that's what people need to understand, is that they are conceptualizing it as they are going to war with the United States, not just Taiwan. Come on, they're not stupid. The Financial Times reports the April 22nd meeting between representatives from China's central bank and financial ministry and executives from all large banks operating in China was called because Chinese officials are worried similar action could be taken against Beijing in the event of a regional military conflict. While the officials and attendees did not mention specific scenarios, according to the report, the most likely trigger for international sanctions is thought to be a Chinese invasion of Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party considers the democratic island and blah, blah, blah of 24 million as a part of China. Okay, if China attacks Taiwan, decoupling of the Chinese and Western economies will be far more severe than decoupling with Russia. I agree. 100%, because China's economic footprint touches every part of the world. One of the people briefed on the meeting told the Financial Times. China holds more than $1 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds and owns a huge amount of real estate, including major New York office buildings and hotels. They also own a lot of Vancouver. Vancouver, I don't know how much real estate they own in BC, but they own a lot. And I believe that, I'm not sure the actual population, but there's a massive Chinese population in Vancouver in Canada. So they haven't figured out a solution to the problem yet. But this is just a sign that, they are thinking about this because, it's coming. It has to come at some point. That's the thing, because the Taiwanese are basically providing the Americans with chips for their weapons that are going to eventually be used against the Chinese. And that's why this whole thing is going on, right? Apparently, there's some stuff going on between Greece and Turkey. I don't know much about it. I don't know historically much about it, but some shizzy's going on, all right? We already talked about that. So let's read an email from Finland. We got a few minutes left on the clock here. I'm from the capital of Finland, Helsinki. Things are still pretty good here, but the global situation and war is beginning to impact our day-to-day life more and more every day. One of the things I noticed in my everyday life is the food shortages. A lot of the products I used to eat before the war have not been available for 2 months. The rice shelves, especially, are very empty, often with one single sort of random rice package available. I used to eat rice every day, but since the war started, I've had to switch to pasta. Fortunately, half the products I used to buy are unavailable, and I just buy what I can find. Fortunately, I started actively preparing last autumn because I could see back then that things were going to get worse with things like the energy crisis, COVID situation, and inflation. This reminds me, do you guys remember when the Chinese were telling their people to stockpile food? I think that was last winter, wasn't it? That was before the Russian invasion. And it's interesting. Almost as if they've seen this coming. Or that pertains to the COVID situation, and that they were trying to encourage people to plan for ongoing lockdowns, which may be implemented in Beijing soon. Okay. Fortunately, I started preparing last autumn. Even back then, they were saying we might get energy shortages and power outages this year because of the energy crisis. Now things are even worse, and they're already talking about things like rolling blackouts, rationing of electricity, and even saying we might get really cold next winter. Wow. Russia has informed us they will shut off our gas pipes by the end of this month. Our factories and home heating systems need the gas to function, so this is a really big concern. After the war started, a lot of people have started preparing. I have at least 2 neighbors who are prepping for war or EMP. A few have also gone to get military or weapons training or even consider joining the Ukraine war. This is very unusual in Finland, since weapons here are usually only used for hunting in the countryside, and since getting a gun for self-defense is not legal according to Finnish law. Very similar here in Canada. But let's not get into that. There's ways around that. Recently, we've had a lot of experts and authorities in the media that are urging every household to get so-called home reserve, consisting of things like 3 days worth of food, water, iodine tablets, a battery-powered radio, and 15 other items. 3 days is not enough. Think about it. 3 days. You go to the grocery store. Do you have 3 days worth of food in your home after you go to the grocery store? So what is 3 days? 3 weeks minimum. Minimum. Blah, blah, blah. What else do we got here? Okay, he goes on. The authorities have also used the media to give citizens information about our bunker system, how to use it, and what the rules and regulations are. For example, we have got a list of things which are forbidden to take with you into bunkers in a crisis situation. This includes things like heating sources, alcohol, drugs, and pets. We also got a list of things to take with us if we needed to use shelters, including personal food and prescription drugs. I live in an apartment house which has its own shelter on the ground floor. The shelter has, losing my voice, has set up, was required by Finnish law. The steel-reinforced walls and special ventilation system is said to protect even against pressure waves and radiation. The shelter is supposed to have things like gas masks, portable toilets, iodine tablets, and water tanks. The only problem is we are told it takes a couple of days to get the shelter set in working order in a crisis situation. These ordinary shelters also do not have food, and the water tanks need to be filled somehow. Every house should also have its own shelter manager who knows how to set up the bunker. It is recommended that this is someone who lives in the building and has volunteered for the job to get the proper training. Yada, yada, yada. Anyways, this is a very long email. But the Finns are prepping, all right? So what else do we got here? There was a guy who was asking me what to do if the authorities come around and start confiscating your stuff after SHTF. My only advice to that is don't do what I've done, which is start a YouTube channel so they know exactly where you are and how much stuff you have. Hide some stuff, cache some stuff. That's really what it comes down to. That's really going to be your only way out of a dystopian police state, post-collapse environment, is stashing things and not broadcasting it. If you can, buy things with cash while you still can before we enter the cashless society, and put stuff away. I don't mean you need to bury 60 days worth of rice in the ground somewhere, but you don't want to have all your eggs in one basket either. You want to spread things around a bit. And really, at the end of the day, though, they're not coming for you. Okay, unless you have a sizable amount of stuff. They're first going to go for businesses like mine. They're going to go for like the consolidated food distribution centers, grocery stores. They're going to go for the big fish first. They're not coming for your, paltry 30-day food supply. Not at all. They don't care about that. Yeah. No, so yeah, I don't think you have much to worry about with respect to that. Let's see what this guy has to say. I got a few minutes left on the clock here, guys. Hello, Nate. My name is Patrick, and I am a big broiler meat chicken producer in Croatia. 200 to 250,000 chickens per year. That's a lot of chickens. The situation is dire. By my calculations, we will go bankrupt in a year if the situation continues like this, and in 6 months if it gets worse. Some are already closing. I wonder if he's going to talk about the bird flu. Let's see. I also know a lot of farmers, agriculture, what they do to the land is bad. By the latest studies, it would take 30 years of cycling clover for land to recover. There are many details about broiler chickens, new, weaker feed formulas, but I won't bore you with that. I don't know anything about it, to be brutally honest. Secondly, last 2 months, there are jets constantly flying over my space, which is a remote, uninteresting rural place. Planes have barely flown here. We are around 1,000 kilometers from Ukraine. But the last 3 weeks, there is a constant sound of a jet engine. It never stops. I am not talking about passenger or cargo aircraft, but fighter planes. Also, there was a big convoy a few days ago through this place. Oversized special military cargo trucks were moving. We had war with the Serbs 25 years ago, and the situation between Croatia and Serbia is heating up in Bosnia, a multinational country of Serbs and Croatians. The majority of Serbs are supporting Russia, so it's a proxy conflict for NATO, Russia. What you might know is that Ukraine was a massive food producer, but not actually how massive. A few weeks ago, manager who wouldn't take your call came to visit us to work for them, Broilers Production. The owner of that company is Ukrainian multi-billionaire Yuri Koziak, who also owns MHP, the largest chicken company in this part of the world. They produce 10 million chickens per day. Wow, that's crazy. In Ukraine, there's 2 billion chickens in the world. No, 20 billion chickens in the world. So 10 million a day, drop in the bucket. Still, very substantial. In Ukraine, there are no GMO-free laws or strict policies, so most of the food gets produced there and gets imported to the EU. The hole in that food market is enormous. I'm not sure where the rest of this email went. Oh, that sucks. That was a good email. Yeah, apparently, the Russians are trying to landlock Ukraine right now. And a lot of their grain, even if they can grow it, getting it shipped out is becoming very tedious, which of course is driving the cost of food up worldwide. Because we live in a global market, and that's just how it is. Let me see here. What else should we read? I think we're going to leave it at that for today, guys. If you have any information you'd like to share with me, feel free to send it to canadianprepper@hotmail.com. I'm going to be releasing a video in the next couple weeks about what I think is one of the best kept secrets in preparedness food. Okay. And yeah, and there's a lot of this stuff left. So I can't say the same for Mountain House. We're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel for our Mountain House inventory. We got a bit left, but it's going to move fast. Happy Yak, we got lots of Happy Yak left. But there's another company I'm going to talk about who, in my personal opinion, is my new favorite. So stay tuned for that. And yes, we also have a special guest on the channel next Tuesday. Tune in. She's going to show us how to prepare food for when the shizzy hits the fizzy. All right. You don't need a freeze dryer. You don't need much, but you need to tune in to see how she does it. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay safe. Take care. Canadian